Mengerti. Sangat pernah tuh. Bukan semua. Nalani daloka, tranaya karunya gana gana tvam, prapta sakalyana gurana vasya, vande guru shri charanaravinam, mahaprabho kirtana nitya gita, vadipramadyan manasorasena, Romanchikam Pashitaranga Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Charanarabindam Shri Vikra Aratana Nityanana Shringaratan Mandiramachinado Yukta Shabhata Chaniyunjatopi Vande Guru Shri Charanarabindam Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasado Shvadhana Triptan Haribhakta Shanga Kritveva Triptim Bhajata Shadeva Vande Guru Shri Charanarabindam Shri Radhika Madhavayora Para Madhurya Leela Gunarupa Namnam Pratikshina Shwadana Lolupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarabindam Nikunja Yuno Radhikeli Shritaye Yaya Libiyo Tirapekshaniya Tatra Chitaksha Pativalabhasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarabindam Sakshat Haritvena Samasta Shastre Uktastatava Yata Eva Sati Kintu Prabhurya Priya Eva Tasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarabindam Yashra Prasadat Bhagavat Prasado Yashya Prasadat Nagati Kutopi Dhyayanstuvan Stasya Yashasri Sandhyam Vande Guru Shri Charanarabindam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyatya Deshtarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Namaste Narasimhaya Prahlad Ladataine हिरण्यकक्षि पूर्वक्षः शीलटङ्कालखलाये इतो नरसिंहो परतो नरसिंहो यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंहो वही नरसिंहो हृदये नरसिंहो नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपद्ये तव करकमलवरे नखाम् अद्भुतशृङ्गाम् दलिता हिरण्यकक्षिपो तनुभृङ्गाम् केशवधृता नरहरिरूप जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे वृंदाय तुलसीदेव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णु भक्ति करे देवी सत्यवती नमः वृंदाय तुलसीदेव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णु भक्ति करे देवी सत्यवती नमः वृंदाय तुलसीदेव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णु भक्ति करे देवी सत्यवती नमो नमः नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः राधा कृष्ण सेवक हे अविनाशी जीतो मारा शरणलो तारा वंशा पूर्ण होय कृपा करी करो तारे वृंदावनवासी मोर ए अभिलाष विलास कुंजे दियो वास नयने हेरिबो सदा युगल रूपराशि हे निवेदन धरो सखीरनुगत करो सेवा अधिकार दिए करो नित्य दासी दिन कृष्ण दास कहे ए न मोरा होय श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा न बाशी यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्मात्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
पूरा टाइट नहीं होगा उसको और लूज से जाएगा
विष्णु भक्ति पदे देवी सत्यवती नमो नमः वृंदाय तुलसी देवी व्याय केशवस्य च विष्णु भक्ति पदे देवी सत्यवती नमो नमः वृंदाय तुलसी देव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णु भक्ति पदे देवी सत्यवती नमो नमः.
What do you read?
Yes, Guru Maharaj.
You can read from anywhere you want.
What do you want to read? Should I read?
Wherever you want.
Whatever you want. Killing of demon Pralambasura. Should I read that, Guru Maharaj?
Sure.
After extinguishing the devastating fire, Krishna, surrounded by his relatives, friends, cows, and bulls, and glorified by his friends, singing again, entered Vrindavan, which is always full of cows. While Krishna and Balrama were enjoying life in Vrindavan, in the midst of the cowherd boys and girls, the season gradually changed to summer. The summer season in India is not very much welcomed because of the excessive heat. But in Vrindavan, everyone was pleased because summer there appeared just like a spring. This was possible only because Lord Krishna and Balrama, who are the controllers even of Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, were residing there. In Vrindavan, there are many falls which are always pouring water, and the sound is so sweet that it covers the sound of the crickets. And because water flows all over, the forest always looks very green and beautiful. The inhabitants of Vrindavana were never disturbed by the scorching heat of the sun or the high summer temperatures. The lakes of Vrindavana are surrounded by green grasses, and various kinds of lotus flowers bloom there, such as Kalhara, Kanja, Utpala. And the air blowing in Vrindavan carries the aromatic pollen of those lotus flowers. When the particles of water from the waves of the Yamuna, the lakes, and the waterfalls touch the bodies of the inhabitants of Vrindavan, they automatically felt a cooling effect. Therefore, they were practically undisturbed by the summer season. Vrindavan is such a nice place. Flowers are always blooming, and there are even various kinds of decorated deer. Birds are chirping, peacocks are crowing and dancing, and bees are humming. The cuckoos they sing nicely in 5 kinds of tunes. Krishna, the reservoir of pleasure, blowing his flute, accompanied by his elder brother Balrama and the other cowherd boys and the cows, entered the beautiful forest of Vrindavan to enjoy the atmosphere. They walked into the midst of newly grown leaves of trees, whose flowers resembled peacock feathers. They were garlanded by those flowers and decorated with saffron chalk. Sometimes they were dancing and singing, and sometimes wrestling with one another. While Krishna danced, some of the cowherd boys sang and others played on flutes. Some bugled on buffalo horns or clapped their hands, praising Krishna. Dear brother, you are dancing very nicely. Actually, all these boys were demigods, descended from higher planets, to assist Krishna in his pastimes. The demigods garbed in the dress of the cowherd boys were encouraging Krishna in his dancing, just as one artist encourages another with praise. Up to that time, neither Balrama nor Krishna had undergone the hair-cutting ceremony. Therefore, their hair were clustered like crows' feathers. They were always playing hide-and-seek with their boyfriends or jumping or fighting with them. Sometimes, while his friends were chanting and dancing, Krishna would praise them. My dear friends, you are dancing and singing very nicely. The boys played at catching ball with fruits such as bale and amalaka. They played blind man's buff, challenging and touching one another. Sometimes they imitated the forest deer and various kinds of birds. They joked with one another by imitating croaking frogs, and they enjoyed swinging underneath the trees. Sometimes they would play among themselves like a king and his subjects. In this way, Balrama and Krishna, along with all their friends, played all kinds of sports and enjoyed the soothing atmosphere of Vrindavan, full of rivers, lakes, rivulets, fine trees, and excellent gardens filled with fruits and flowers. Once, while the boys were engaged In the transcendental pastimes, a great demon of the name Pralambasura entered their company, desiring to kidnap both Balrama and Krishna. Although Krishna was playing the part of a coward boy as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he could understand everything, past, present, and future. So when Pralambasura entered their company, Krishna began to think how to kill the demon, but externally receive him as a friend. "Oh, my dear friend," he said, "it is very good that you have come to take part in our pastimes." Krishna then called all his friends and ordered them, Now we shall play in pairs. We shall challenge one another in pairs." With this proposal, all the boys assembled together. Some of them took the side of Krishna, and some of them took the side of Balrama, and they arranged to play in duel. The defeated members in duel fighting had to carry the victorious member on their backs as a horse carries its master. They began playing and at the same time tended the cows as they proceeded through the Bandiravana forest. The party of Balrama, accompanied by Sridham and Rishabha, came out victorious, and Krishna's party had to carry them on their backs through the Bandiravan forest. The Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, being defeated, had to carry Sridhama on his back, and Bhadrasena carried Rishabha. Imitating their play, Pralambasura, who appeared there as a coward boy, carried Balrama on his back. Pralambasura was the greatest of the demons, and he had calculated that Krishna was the most powerful of the coward boys. In order to avoid the company of Krishna, Pralambasura carried Balrama far away. The demon was undoubtedly very strong and powerful, but he was carrying Balrama, who is compared to a mountain. Therefore he began to feel the burden, and thus he assumed his real form. When he appeared in his real feature, he was decorated with the golden helmet and earrings and looked just like a cloud with lighting, carrying the moon. Balrama observed the demon's body expanding up to the limits of the clouds, his eyes dazzling like blazing fire and his mouth flashing with sharpened teeth. At first, Balrama was surprised by the demon's appearance, and he began to wonder, how is it that all of a sudden this carrier has changed in every way? But with a clear mind, he could quickly understand that he was being carried away from his friends by a demon who intended to kill him. Immediately, he struck the head of the demon with his strong fist, just as the king of the heavenly planets strikes a mountain with his thunderbolt. Stricken by the fist of Balrama, the demon fell down dead, just like a snake with a smashed head, and blood poured from his mouth. When the demon fell, he made a tremendous sound, and it sounded as if a great hill were falling upon being struck by a thunderbolt of King Indra. All the boys then rushed to the spot. Astonished by the ghastly scene, they began to praise Balrama with the words, "Well done, well done." All of them then embraced Balrama with great affection, thinking that he had returned from death, and they offered their blessings and congratulations. All the demigods in the heavenly planets became very satisfied and showered flowers on the transcendental body of Balrama. And they also offered their blessings and congratulations for his having killed the great demon Pralambasura. Chapter number Sudhava? 80? Oh yeah, 73. The meeting of Lord Krishna with Sudama Brahman. King Parikshit was hearing the narrations of the pastimes of Lord Krishna and Balrama from Sukadeva Goswami. These pastimes are all transcendently pleasurable to hear, and Maharaj Parikshit addressed Sukadeva Goswami as follows. My dear Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna is a bestower of both liberation and love of God simultaneously. Anyone who becomes a devotee of the Lord automatically attains liberation without having to make a separate attempt. Because the Lord is unlimited, his pastimes and activities for creating, maintaining, destroying the whole cosmic manifestation are also unlimited. I therefore wish to hear about other pastimes of his which you may have not described as yet. My dear Master, the conditioned souls within this material world are frustrated by searching out the pleasure of happiness derived from sense gratification. Such desires for material enjoyment are always piercing the hearts of conditioned souls. But I am actually experiencing how the transcendental topics of Lord Krishna's pastimes can relieve one from being affected by such material activities of sense gratification. I think that no intelligent person can reject this method of hearing the transcendental pastimes of the Lord again and again. Simply by hearing, one can remain always steeped in the transcendental pleasure. Thus one will not be attracted by material sense gratification. In this statement, Maharaj Parikshit had used two important words, Visana and Vishayagna. Visana means morose. Materialistic people in many ways and means to become fully satisfied, but actually they remain morose. The point may be raised that sometimes transcendentalists also remain morose. Parikshit Maharaj, however, has used the word Visheshagna. These are the two kinds of transcendentalists, namely the impersonalist and the personalist. Visheshagna refers to the personalists who are interested in transcendental righteousness. The devotees became jubilant by hearing the description of the personal activities of the Supreme Lord, whereas the impersonalists, who are actually more attracted by the impersonal feature of the Lord, are only superficially attracted by the Lord's personal activities. As such, in spite of coming in contact with the pastimes of the Lord, the impersonalists do not fully realize the benefit to be derived, and thus they became just as morose as the materialists do in pursuing their future activities. King Parikshit continued, the ability to talk can be perfected only by describing the transcendental qualities of the Lord. The ability to work with one's hands can be successful only when one engages himself in the service of the Lord with those hands. Similarly, one's mind can be peaceful only when one simply thinks of Krishna in full Krishna consciousness. This does not mean that one has to have very great thinking power. One has to understand simply that Krishna, the absolute truth, is all pervasive by his localized aspect of Paramatma. If one can simply think that Krishna as Paramatma is everywhere, even within the atom, and one can perfect the thinking, feeling, and willing functions of this mind. The perfect devotee does not see the material world as it appears to material eyes, for he sees everywhere the presence of his worshipful Lord in his Paramatma feature. Maharaj Parikshit continued by saying that the function of the ear can be perfected simply by engagement in hearing the transcendental activities of the Lord. And the function of the head can be fully utilized when the head is engaged in bowing down before the Lord and his representative. That the Lord is represented in everyone's heart is a fact, and therefore the highly advanced devotee offers his respects to every living entity, considering that the body is the temple of the Lord. But it is not possible for all men to come to that stage of life immediately, because that stage is for the first-class devotee. The second-class devotee can consider the Vaishnavas or the devotees of the Lord to be representatives of Krishna. And the devotee who is just beginning, the neophyte or third-class devotee, can bow his head before the deity in temple, before the spiritual master, who is the direct manifestation of the Supreme Personality of God. Therefore, in the neophyte stage, in the intermediate stage, or in the fully advanced perfected stage, one can make the function of head perfect by bowing down before the Lord or his representative. Similarly, one can perfect the function of his eyes by seeing the Lord and his representative. In this way, everyone can elevate the functions of the different parts of his body to the highest perfection stage simply by engaging them in the service of the Lord or his representative. If one is able to do nothing more, he can simply bow down before the Lord and his representative and drink the Charanamrita, the water which has washed the lotus feet of the Lord or his devotee. On hearing the statements of Maharaj Parikshit, Sukadeva Goswami was overwhelmed with devotion ecstasy because of King Parikshit's advanced understanding of the Vaishnava philosophy. Sukadeva Goswami was already engaged in describing the activities of the Lord, and when asked by Maharaj Parikshit to describe them further, he continued to narrate Srimad Bhagavatam with great pleasure. There was a very nice Brahmana, a friend of Lord Krishna. As a perfect Brahmana, he was very elevated in transcendental knowledge. And because of his advanced knowledge, he was not at all attached to material enjoyment. Therefore, he was very peaceful and had achieved supreme control over his senses. This means that the Brahmana was a perfect devotee, because unless one is perfect devotee, he cannot achieve the highest standard of knowledge. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita that a person who has come to the perfection of knowledge surrenders onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, any person who has surrendered his life for the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead has come to the point of perfect knowledge. The result of perfect knowledge is that one becomes detached from a materialistic way of life. This detachment means complete control of senses, which are always attracted by material enjoyment. The senses of devotee become purified, and in that stage, the senses are engaged in the service of the Lord. That is a complete field of devotional service. Although the Brahman friend of Lord Krishna was a householder, he was not busy accumulating wealth for very comfortable living. Therefore, he was satisfied by the income which automatically came to him according to his destiny. This is a sign of perfect knowledge. A man in perfect knowledge knows that one cannot be happier than he is destined to be. In this material world, everyone is destined to suffer a certain amount of distress and enjoy a certain amount of happiness. The amount of happiness and distress is already predestined for every living entity. No one can increase or decrease the happiness of the materialistic way of life. The Brahmana therefore did not exert himself for more material
Read
happiness.
the last 10 lines.
Last 10 lines.
Back last.
Yeah. The result of perfect knowledge is that one becomes detached from materialistic way of life. This detachment means complete control of the senses, which are always attracted by material enjoyment. The senses of the devotee become purified, and in that stage, the senses are engaged in the service of the Lord. That is the complete field of devotional service. Although the Brahman friend of Lord Krishna was a householder, he was not busy accumulating wealth for very comfortable living. Therefore, he was satisfied by the income which automatically came to him according to his destiny. This is a sign of perfect knowledge. A man in perfect knowledge knows that one cannot be happier than he is destined to be. In this material world, everyone is destined to suffer a certain type of distress and enjoy a certain amount of happiness. The amount of happiness and distress is already predestined for every living entity. No one can increase or decrease the happiness of materialistic way of life. The Brahmana therefore did not exert himself for more material happiness. Instead, he used his time for advancement of Krishna consciousness. Instead, externally he appeared very poor because he had no rich clothes and could not provide rich clothes for his wife. Because the material condition was not very opulent, they were not even eating sufficiently, and thus both he and his wife appeared very thin. The wife was not anxious for her personal comfort, but she felt concerned for her husband, who was such a pious Brahmana. She trembled due to her weak health. Although she did not like to dictate to her husband, she spoke as follows: "My dear Lord, I know that Lord Krishna, the husband of Goddess of Fortune, is a personal friend. You are also a devotee of Lord Krishna, and is always ready to help his devotee. Even if you think that you are not rendering any devotional service to the Lord, still you are surrendered to him. And the Lord is the protector of the surrendered soul. Moreover, I know that Lord Krishna is the ideal personality of Vedic culture. He is always in favor of Brahmanical culture and is very kind to the qualified Brahmanas. You are the most fortunate person because you have as your friend the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Krishna is the only shelter for the personalities like you because you are fully surrendered unto him. You are saintly, learned, and fully in control of your senses. Under the circumstances, Lord Krishna is your only shelter. Please, therefore, go to him. I am sure that he will immediately understand your impoverished position. You are a householder, therefore without money, you are in distress. But as soon as he understands your position, he will certainly give you abundant riches so that you can live very comfortably. Lord Krishna is now the king of Bhoja, Vrishni and Andhaka dynasties. And I have heard that he never leaves his capital city Dwarka. He is living there without outside engagement. He is so kind and liberal that he immediately gives everything, even his personal self, to any person who surrenders unto him. Since he is prepared to give himself personally to his devotee, there is nothing wonderful in giving some material riches. Of course, he does not give much material wealth to his devotee if the devotee is not very much fixed. But I think that in your case, he knows perfectly well how much you are fixed in devotional service. Therefore, he will not hesitate to award you some material benefit for the bare necessities of life. In this way, the wife of the Brahmana again and again requested in great humility and submission that he go to Lord Krishna. The Brahmana thought that there was no need to ask any material benefit from Lord Sri Krishna. But he was induced by the repeated requests of his wife. Moreover, he thought, if I go there, I shall be able to see the Lord personally. That will be a great opportunity, even if I don't ask any material benefit from him. When he had decided to go to Krishna, he asked his wife if she had anything in the home that he could offer to Krishna, because he must take some presentation for his friend. The wife immediately collected 4 palmfuls of chipped rice from her neighborhood friends and tied it in a small cloth, like a handkerchief, and gave it to her husband.
We read line to line.
Yes, please. When he had decided to go to Krishna, he asked his wife if she had anything in the home that he could offer to Krishna, because he must take some presentation for his friend. The wife immediately collected 4 palmfuls of chipped rice from her neighborhood friends and tied it in a small cloth, like a handkerchief, and gave it to her husband to present to Krishna. Without wasting any longer, the Brahmana took the presentation and proceeded toward Dwarka to see his Lord. He was absorbed in the thought of how he would be able to see Lord Krishna. He had no thought within his heart other than Krishna. It was, of course, very difficult to reach the palaces of the kings of the Yadu dynasty, but Brahmanas were allowed to visit. When the Brahmana friend of Lord Krishna went there, he, along with other Brahmanas, had to pass through 3 military encampments. In each camp, there were very big gates, and he also had to pass through them. After the gates and the camps, there were 16,000 big palaces, the residential quarters of the 16,000 queens of Lord Krishna. The Brahmana entered one palace which was very gorgeously decorated. When he entered this beautiful palace, he felt that he was swimming in the ocean of transcendental pleasure. He felt himself constantly diving and surfacing in that transcendental ocean. At that time, Lord Krishna was sitting on the bedstead of Queen Rukmani. Even from a considerable distance, he could see the Brahmana coming to his home, and he could recognize him as his friend. Lord Krishna immediately left his seat and came forward to receive his Brahman friend, and upon reaching him, embraced the Brahmana with his 2 arms. Lord Krishna is the reservoir of all transcendental pleasure, yet he himself felt great pleasure upon embracing the poor Brahmana, because he was meeting his very dear friend. Lord Krishna had him seated on his own bedstead and personally brought all kinds of fruits and drinks to offer him, as if proper in receiving a worshipful guest. Lord Sri Krishna is the supreme pure, but because he was playing the role of an ordinary human being, he immediately washed the Brahmana's feet, and for his own purification, sprinkled the water on his head. After this, the Lord smeared the body of Brahmana with different kinds of scented pulp, such as sandalwood, agura, and saffron. He immediately burned several kinds of scented incense, and as is usual, offered him arti with burning lamps. After thus offering him an adequate welcome, and after the Brahmana had taken food and drink, Lord Krishna said, "My dear friend, it is great fortune that you have come here." The Brahmana, being very poor, was not dressed nicely. His clothing was torn and dirty, and his body was very lean and thin. He appeared not very clean, but because of his weak body, his bones were distinctly visible. The goddesses of fortune, Rukmani Devi, personally began to fan him with the chamara fan, but the other women in the palace were astonished at Lord Krishna's behavior in receiving Brahmana in that way. They were surprised to see how eager Lord Krishna was to welcome this particular Brahmana.
They wonder how Lord Krishna could personally receive a Brahmana who was poor, not very neat or clean, and poorly dressed. At the same time, they could realize that Brahmana was not an ordinary living being. They knew that he must have performed great pious activities, otherwise why was Lord Krishna, the husband of Goddess of Fortune, taking care of him so much? They were still more surprised to see that Brahmana was seated on the bedstead of Lord Krishna. They were especially surprised to see that Lord Krishna had embraced him exactly as he embraced his elder brother Balramaji, because Lord Krishna used to embrace only Rukmani or Balram, no one else. After the Brahmana had been received nicely and seated on Lord Krishna's own cushion bed, he and Krishna took each other's hands and began to talk about their early life, when they had both lived under the protection of Gurukula. Lord Krishna said, "My dear Brahmana friend, you are a most intelligent personality, and you know very well the principles of religious life. I believe that after you finish your education at the house of your teacher, at the house of our teacher, and after you sufficiently remunerated him, you must have gone back to your home and accepted a suitable wife. I know very well that from the beginning you were not at all attached to the materialistic way of life, nor did you desire to be very opulent materially, and therefore you are in need of money. In this material world, persons who are not attached to material opulence are very rarely found. Such unattached persons haven't the least desire to accumulate wealth and prosperity for sense gratification. But sometimes they are found to collect money just to exhibit the exemplary life of a householder. They show how by a proper distribution of wealth, one can become an ideal householder, and at the same time a great devotee. Such ideal householders are to be considered followers of my footsteps. I hope, my dear Brahmin friend, that you remember all those days of our school life when you and I were living together at the boarding school. Actually, whatever knowledge you and I received in life was accumulated in our student life. If a man is sufficiently educated in his student life, under the guidance of a proper teacher, his life becomes successful in the future. He can very easily cross over the ocean of nescience, and he can very easily cross over the ocean of nescience, and he is not subject to the influence of the illusory energy. My dear friend, everyone should consider his father to be his first teacher, because by the mercy of one's father, he gets the body. The father is therefore the natural spiritual master. Our next spiritual master is he who initiates us into transcendental knowledge, and he is to be worshipped as much as I am. The spiritual master may be more than one. The spiritual master who instructs the disciples about spiritual matter is called Siksha Guru, and the spiritual master who initiates the disciple is called Diksha Guru. Both of them are my representatives. There may be many spiritual masters who instruct, but the initiator spiritual master is one. A human being who takes advantage of these spiritual masters and receiving proper knowledge from them crosses the ocean of material existence is to be understood as having properly utilized his human form of life. He has practical knowledge that the ultimate interest of life, which is to be gained only in this human form, is to achieve spiritual perfection and thus be transferred back home, back to Godhead. My dear friend, I am Paramatma, the super soul present in everyone's heart. And it is my direct order that human society follow the principles of Varna and Ashrama. As I have stated in the Bhagavad Gita, human society should be divided into 4 Varnas, according to quality and action. Similarly, everyone should divide his life into 4 parts. One should utilize the first part of his life in becoming a bona fide student, receiving adequate knowledge, and keeping oneself in the vow of brahmachari, so that one may completely devote his life for the service of the spiritual master, without indulging in sense gratification. A brahmachari is meant to lead a life of austerities and penance. The householder is meant to live a regulated life of sense gratification. But no one should remain a householder for the 3rd stage of life. In that stage, one has to return to the austerities and penances formally practiced in brahmachari life and thus relieve himself of attachment to household life. After being relieved of his attachments to materialistic way of life, one may accept the order of sannyas. As the super soul of the living entities, I sit in everyone's heart and observe everyone's activity in every stage and order of life. regardless of which stage one is in. When I see that one is engaged seriously and sincerely in discharging the duties ordered by the spiritual master, and is thus dedicating his life to the service of the spiritual master, that person becomes most dear to me. As far as the life of brahmachari is concerned, if one can continue the life of brahmachari under the direction of spiritual master, that is extremely good. But if in brahmachari life one feels sex impulses, he should take leave of his spiritual master, satisfying him according to the Guru's desire. According to the Vedic system, a gift is offered to the spiritual master, which is called Guru Dakshina. Then the disciple should take to the householder life, and accept a wife according to religious rites. This instructions given by Lord Krishna by talking with his friend, the learned Brahmana, was very good for the guidance of human society. A system of human civilization that does not promote varna and ashrama is nothing but a polished animal society. Indulgence in a sex life by men or women living single is never acceptable in human society. A man should strictly follow the principles of brahmachari life, or with the permission of the spiritual master should get married. Single life with illicit sex is animal life, for the animals have no such institution as marriage. Modern society does not aim at fulfilling the mission of human life, which is to go back home, back to Godhead. To fulfill this mission, the system of varna and ashrama must be followed. When the system is followed rigidly and consciously, it fulfills the mission, but when followed indirectly without the guidance of superior authority, it simply creates a disturbing condition in human society, and there is no peace and prosperity. Krishna continued to talk with his Brahmin friend. My dear friend, I think you remember our activities during the days when we were living as students. You may remember that once we went to collect fuel for the forest on the order of Guru's wife. While collecting the dried woods, we entered the dense forest and by chance became lost. There was an unexpected dust storm, and the clouds and lightning in the sky, an explosive sound of thunder. Then the sunset came, and we were lost in the dark jungle. After this, there was a severe rainfall. The whole ground was overflooded with water, and we could not stress out the way to return to our Guru's ashram. You may remember that heavy rainfall. It was not actually rainfall, but a sort of devastation. On account of the dust storm and the heavy rain, we began to feel greatly pain. In whichever direction we turned, we were bewildered. In that distressed condition, we took each other's hand and tried to find our way out. We passed the whole night in that way, and early in the morning, when our absence became known to our Gurudev, he sent his other disciples to search us out. We also came with them, and when they reached us in the jungle, they found us very much distressed. With great compassion, our Gurudev said, My dear boy, it is very wonderful that you have suffered so much trouble for me. Everyone likes to take care of his body as the first consideration. But you are so good and faithful to your Guru that without caring for your bodily comforts, you have taken so much trouble for me. I am glad to see that bona fide students like you will undergo any kind of trouble for the satisfaction of the spiritual master. There is a way for a bona fide disciple to become free from his debt to spiritual master. It is a duty of the disciple to dedicate his life to the service of the spiritual master. My dear best of twice born, I am greatly pleased by your acts, and I bless you. May all your desires and ambitions be fulfilled. May the understanding of the Vedas which you have learned from me always continue to remain within your memory, so that at every moment you can remember the teachings of the Vedas and quote their instruction without difficulty. Thus you will never be disappointed in this life or next. Krishna continued. My dear friend, you may remember that many such incidents occurred while we were in the ashram of our spiritual master. Both of us can realize that without the blessing of the spiritual master, no one can become happy. By the mercy of the spiritual master and by his blessings, one can achieve peace and prosperity and be able to fulfill the mission of the human life. On hearing this, the learned Brahmana replied, My dear Krishna, you are the Supreme Lord and the Supreme Spiritual Master of everyone. And since I was fortunate enough to live with you in the house of our Guru, I think I have nothing more to do in the matter of prescribed Vedic duties. My dear Lord, the Vedic hymns, ritualistic ceremonies, religious activities, and all other necessities for the perfection of human life, including economic development, self-gratification, and liberation, are all derived from one soul, your Supreme Personality. All the different processes of life are ultimately meant for understanding your personality. In other words, there are different parts of your transcendental form. And yet you play the role of student and live with us in the house of Guru. This means that you have adapted all these pastimes for your pleasure only. Otherwise, there was no need for your playing the role of human being. The Brahman Sudama, blessed by Lord Krishna. You want to read? I will finish my daily worship. Yeah, he's reading the next chapter.
Chapter
We
81.
do your puja.
Yes, Guru Maharaj. I just
आपका मन में तो पढ़ेंगे.
The Brahmana Sudama blessed by Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supersoul of all living entities, knows everyone's heart very well. He is especially inclined to the Brahmana devotees. Lord Krishna is also called Brahmanya Dev, which means that he is the devotee, he is worshipped by the Brahmanas. Therefore, it is understood that a devotee who is fully surrendered unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead has already acquired the position of a Brahmana. Without becoming a Brahmana, one cannot approach the Supreme Brahman, Lord Sri Krishna. Krishna is especially concerned with vanquishing the distress of his devotees, and he is the only shelter of pure devotees. Lord Krishna engaged for a long time in talking with Sudama Vipra about their past association. Then, just to enjoy the company of an old friend, Lord Krishna began to smile and asked, "My dear friend, what have you brought for me? Has your wife given you some nice eatable for me?" While addressing his friend, Lord Krishna looked upon him and smiled with great love. He continued, "My dear friend, you must have brought some presentation for me from your home." Lord Krishna knew that Sudama was hesitating to present him with the paltry chipped rice, which was actually unfit for his eating. Understanding the mind of Sudama, Lord Sri Krishna said, "My dear friend, I am certainly not in need of anything, but if my devotee gives me something as an offering of love, even though it may be very insignificant, I accept it with great pleasure. On the other hand, if a person is not a devotee, even though he may offer me very valuable things, I do not like to accept them. I actually accept only things offered to me in devotion and love. Otherwise, however valuable a thing may be, I do not accept it. If my pure devotees offer me even the most insignificant things, a little flower, a little piece of leaf, a little water, but saturate the offering in devotional love, then not only do I gladly accept such an offering, but I eat it with great pleasure." Lord Krishna assured Sudama Vipra that he would be very glad to accept the cheap rice he had brought from home. Yet, out of great shyness, Sudama hesitated to present it to the Lord. He was thinking, how can I offer such an insignificant thing to Lord Krishna? And he simply bowed his head. Lord Krishna, the Super Soul, knows everything in everyone's heart. He knows everyone's determination and everyone's want. He knew therefore the reason for Sudama Vipra's coming to him. He knew that, driven by extreme poverty, he had come there at the request of his wife. Thinking of Sudama as his very dear class friend, he knew that Sudama's love for him as a friend was never tainted by any desire for material benefit. Krishna thought, Sudama has not come asking anything from me. Being obliged by the request of his wife, he has come to see me just to please her. Lord Krishna therefore decided that he would give more material opulence to Sudama Vipra than could be imagined by the King of Heaven. He then snatched the bundle of chipped rice which was hanging on the shoulder of the poor Brahmana, packed in one corner of her wrapper, and said, "What is this? My dear friend, you have brought me nice palatable chipped rice." He encouraged Sudama Vipra, saying, "I consider that this quantity of chipped rice will satisfy not only me but the whole creation." It is understood from this statement that Krishna, being the original source of everything, is the root of entire creation. As watering the root of a tree immediately distributes water to every part of the tree, so an offering made to Krishna or any action done for Krishna is to be considered the highest welfare work for everyone, because the benefit of such an offering is distributed throughout the creation. Love for Krishna is distributed to all living entities. While Lord Krishna was speaking to Sudama Vipra, he ate one morsel of chipped rice from his bundle, and when he attempted to eat the second morsel, Rukmini Devi, the goddess of fortune herself, checked the Lord by catching hold of his hand. After touching the hand of Krishna, Rukmini said, "My dear Lord, this one morsel of the chipped rice is sufficient to cause him who offered it to become very opulent in this life and to continue his opulence in the next life. My dear Lord, you are so kind to your devotee that even this one morsel of chipped rice pleases you very greatly, and your pleasure assures the devotee's opulence in both this life and the next." This indicates that when food is offered to Lord Krishna with love and devotion, and he is pleased and accepts it from the devotee, Rukmini Devi, the goddess of fortune, becomes so greatly obliged to the devotee that she has to go personally to the devotee's home to turn it into the most opulent home in the world. If one feeds Narayan sumptuously, the goddess of fortune Lakshmi automatically becomes a guest in one's house, which means that one's home becomes opulent. The learned Brahmana Sudama passed that night at the house of Lord Krishna, where he felt as if he were living on Vaikuntha planet. Actually, he was living in Vaikuntha, because wherever Lord Krishna, the original Narayan, and Rukmini Devi, the goddess of fortune, live is not different from spiritual planet, Vaikuntha Loka. The learned Brahmana Sudama did not appear to have received anything substantial from Lord Sri Krishna while at his palace. Yet, he did not ask anything from the Lord. The next morning he started for his home, thinking always about his reception by Krishna, and thus he merged in transcendental bliss. All the way home, he simply remembered the dealings of Lord Krishna. He felt very happy to have seen the Lord. The Brahmana thought, it is most pleasurable to see Lord Krishna, who is most devoted to the Brahmanas. How great a lover he is of the Brahmanical culture. He is the supreme Brahman himself, yet he reciprocates with the Brahmanas. He also respects the Brahmanas so much that he embraced to his chest such a poor, lowly Brahmana as me, although he never embraces anyone to his chest except the goddess of fortune. How can there be any comparison between me, a poor, sinful Brahmana, and the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, who is the only shelter of goddess of fortune? And yet, considering me a Brahmana with heartfelt pleasure, he embraced me in his two transcendental arms. Lord Krishna was so kind to me that he allowed me to sit on the same bedset where the goddess of fortune lies down. He considered me his real brother. How can I appreciate my obligation to him? When I was tired, Srimati Rukmini Devi, the goddess of fortune, began to fan me, holding the chamara waist in her own hand. She never considered her exalted position as the first queen of Lord Krishna. I was rendered service by the Supreme Personality of Godhead because of his high regard for the Brahmanas, and by massaging my leg and feeding me with his own hand, he practically worshipped me. Aspiring for the elevation to heavenly planets, liberation, all kind of material opulence, or perfection in the power of mystic yoga, everyone throughout the universe worships Lord Sri Krishna's lotus feet. Yet, the Lord was so kind to me that he did not